The night was colder than she remembered. The city lights blurred through Victoria Hale's car window as she drove, her son sleeping in the back seat, unaware of the world's sharp edges. She thought she had built her fortress high enough, walls of steel and silence around a heart that had been shattered once before. But life doesn't ask permission before it shakes you. In one heartbeat, everything you thought was safe can slip away. And sometimes, it takes a stranger to put it back together. Victoria Hale had lived with control for years. Every decision, every move in her billion-dollar empire was calculated. Yet no amount of wealth or foresight could protect her from the ache that lingered since her husband's sudden death 3 years earlier. Her world had narrowed to two things: her son Ethan and her company. Nothing else mattered. That evening, the city was unusually quiet as she drove home after a long meeting. Ethan, 7 years old, had been restless, begging for ice cream despite the late hour. Against her better judgment, she stopped near a small downtown cafe. She was about to unbuckle his seatbelt when her phone buzzed, a board member demanding a late update. Distracted, she looked away for a split second. That's all it took. Ethan, full of energy, pushed the door open and ran toward the sidewalk. She froze when she saw the headlights. A speeding car tore down the street, and her son stood directly in its path. Victoria's voice caught in her throat as she screamed his name. But before she could move, a figure sprinted out of nowhere. Ryan Carter's arms scooped Ethan from the street just as the car screeched past. Tires screamed against pavement. The driver didn't stop. Victoria's heart hammered as she stumbled forward, knees buckling with terror. She reached her son, who clung to Ryan's chest, shaken but alive. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her entire world, the one she had fought to protect, was in the arms of a stranger. Ryan knelt, checking Ethan's face gently, his voice steady, his calmness grounding in the chaos. "You okay, buddy?" he asked softly. Victoria's walls cracked when Ethan nodded, tears streaking down his cheeks. She caught Ryan's eyes then, warm, steady, utterly unshaken, despite what had just happened. Something stirred deep inside her chest, a flutter she hadn't felt in years. Gratitude, yes, but also something dangerous. Hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. But Ryan only gave a small smile, brushing dirt from Ethan's shirt. "Anyone would have done the same," he said. But Victoria knew better. Not everyone would. Not everyone could. The drive home was quiet, except for Ethan's sniffles. Victoria's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She replayed the moment over and over. The blinding headlights, the scream stuck in her throat, Ryan's sudden arrival. When she tucked Ethan into bed, he asked, "Mom, is he a hero?" She froze. Her son's world had been saved by a stranger, and in his young eyes, Ryan was now larger than life. Victoria lingered at the doorway long after Ethan fell asleep. She wanted to lock the world away forever, to keep Ethan safe inside walls money could buy. But tonight reminded her of the truth. Life could snatch what you love in a breath. She told herself Ryan was just a passing moment, a man she'd never see again. But the universe had a way of weaving people back into your life, whether you wanted it or not. The following week, Victoria's assistant mentioned a new maintenance hire who had impressed the staff with his diligence. She barely listened, until she walked past the lobby and froze. Ryan Carter, the man who saved her son, stood there in work boots, fixing a panel. Her breath caught. He wasn't a polished executive, not the type of man who filled her boardroom. But here he was, part of her company in the most unexpected way. Their eyes met, and recognition sparked instantly. Ryan straightened, wiping dust from his hands. "Small world," he said with a half-smile. Victoria's heart lurched in a way she hated. She told herself she should keep her distance. He was an employee, far from her world. But something about the way he looked at her, steady, without expectation, shook the certainty she clung to. Victoria tried to bury herself in work. Spreadsheets, contracts, meetings, the things that usually grounded her. But Ryan lingered at the edges of her mind. She hated it. She wasn't a woman who got distracted by anyone. Then one evening, Ethan bounced into her office, beaming. "Mom, Ryan fixed my bike!" Her son's joy was uncontainable. She turned sharply, and there Ryan stood, smiling awkwardly, holding a smudge of grease on his hand. She wanted to scold him for overstepping, for getting too close. But when she saw Ethan's face lit up in pure happiness, the words stuck. It had been so long since she'd seen her son that carefree. "Thank you," she muttered stiffly. Ryan shrugged. "Kids should have working bikes, that's all." Simple. Uncomplicated. And yet, it meant everything. Rumors spread through the company quickly. The CEO was seen talking to a maintenance worker. Her board frowned at the distraction, whispering that Victoria was losing her edge. She ignored them outwardly, but inwardly the weight of judgment pressed down. Her late husband, Richard, had been a polished, powerful man, her equal in every way. That's the life her peers expected her to rebuild. Not this. Not a quiet man with calloused hands and no fortune. But Ryan didn't seem to care about her wealth or power. When they spoke, it wasn't about business or reputation. He talked about books, about simple joys, about the value of time. It was infuriating and intoxicating. And slowly her son began to laugh more, smile more. That alone was enough to chip away at her walls. One evening, Victoria found herself sitting outside the office building long after everyone left. Ryan emerged, toolbox in hand. He paused when he saw her, hesitating before walking over. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. She almost laughed. She was a billionaire CEO, used to commanding empires, and yet here was this man, treating her as though she was just human. Without meaning to, she confessed, "Sometimes I don't know if I'm strong enough for all this." Her voice trembled in a way she despised, but Ryan didn't flinch. "Strength isn't about never breaking," he said. "It's about finding reasons to get back up." And for the first time in years, she felt seen. Not as a CEO, not as a widow, but as a woman. Victoria's board soon grew restless. They pushed her toward a merger with a European tech giant, reminding her of her duty, her reputation. She agreed to meetings in London, burying herself in schedules. Ryan, meanwhile, stayed a steady presence in Ethan's life. He taught him how to ride faster on his bike, how to mend things with his own hands. Ethan began calling him Coach, a name that warmed and terrified Victoria at once. When she returned from London, she found her son asleep on the couch, Ryan reading quietly nearby. The sight hit her like a tidal wave. Home had never felt so alive since Richard's death. But home was also dangerous, because home meant love, and love meant loss. She couldn't risk that again. Determined to create distance, Victoria avoided Ryan for weeks. She cut short conversations, reassigned tasks, tried to bury him back into the background of her empire. But Ethan noticed. "Why don't you let him come over anymore?" he asked one night, his voice small. "He makes me feel safe." The words pierced her. Safe. How could she deny her son the one thing she'd been desperate to give him? Her heart twisted, torn between fear and longing. That evening she stood at her window, staring at the glittering skyline. She had vowed never to love again. And yet, the walls she built were crumbling, brick by brick, with every smile Ryan gave her son. Her breaking point came when Ethan fell sick with a fever one stormy night. Alone and panicked, Victoria struggled to keep him cool. She nearly called an ambulance, but Ryan appeared at the door, soaked from rain. Ethan had called him on her phone without her knowing. Ryan's calm steadiness carried her through those hours, mixing medicine, cooling Ethan's forehead, staying until her son slept peacefully. When the storm finally cleared, Victoria found herself sitting across from Ryan at her kitchen table, exhausted. Silence stretched, heavy and raw, and then she whispered, "I don't know how to do this without you." But the world didn't stop to let her breathe. Tabloids caught wind of Victoria's connection with the mystery man. Photographers trailed her car. Board members demanded explanations. She faced them all with her usual icy composure. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. Could she really risk her empire, her carefully guarded life, for a man who had nothing to offer except his heart? When she tried to distance herself again, Ryan didn't fight. He simply said, "I won't chase what you don't want." His calm acceptance cut deeper than any accusation, because deep down, she did want, more than she dared admit. The London merger loomed closer, promising expansion and billions in profit. It was everything she had built her life around. But at the celebratory dinner, surrounded by glittering chandeliers and powerful men, she felt hollow. Her mind drifted to a little boy at home, and the man who had sat by his bedside in a storm, the man who never asked her for anything but gave everything he had. That night, in her lavish hotel room, she realized wealth meant nothing if it couldn't fill the ache in her heart. She had spent years building walls of glass and steel, but they only left her alone inside them. For the first time in years, she wanted something else. Returning home, she found Ethan bursting with excitement. Ryan had taken him fishing, and his stories spilled out in endless joy. Victoria stood at the doorway, watching the two of them together. Ryan looked up, his smile quiet but sure. Something inside her broke free, as if the ghost of her late husband had finally released her hand. She knew what her board would say, what the world would whisper. But in this moment, none of it mattered. She was a mother, a woman, and she wanted to live again. And so, for the first time, she let herself smile back. But love never comes without tests. Ethan's school held a father-son event. Ethan begged Ryan to come, and Victoria hesitated. It would be too public, too telling. But Ryan simply said, "It's your call." Her heart twisted. Ethan had lost one father. Was it fair to let him look to Ryan now? She attended the event, sitting at the back. Ethan beamed as Ryan helped him with the games, laughter filling the air. Parents whispered, glances turned. But Victoria only saw her son, happy, whole, safe. For once, she didn't care about the whispers. Of course, the whispers grew louder. A tabloid headline screamed, "Billionaire CEO seen with maintenance worker, secret romance." Her board convened an emergency meeting, urging her to cut ties immediately. "It's bad for optics," one member said. "You have too much at stake." Victoria listened quietly. Then, for the first time in years, she defied them. "My personal life is not a board matter," she said coldly. Gasps filled the room, but she walked out without looking back. It terrified her, but it also felt like freedom. Ryan, however, didn't celebrate her defiance. Instead, he grew distant. "I don't want to be the reason your empire crumbles," he admitted one evening. She wanted to scream that her empire meant nothing without him. But the words stuck. Fear still clawed at her chest. Ethan, sensing the tension, asked softly, "Mom, why can't we just be happy?" And in that small voice, Victoria realized the truth. She was letting fear steal what life had finally given her again. It was time to decide. She invited Ryan to dinner, her hands trembling as she cooked for the first time in years. Ethan buzzed with excitement, setting the table. When Ryan arrived, awkward in a clean shirt, Victoria took a breath. "I don't care what they say," she told him firmly. "I don't care what it costs. I want you in our lives." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then Ryan reached across the table, taking her hand. His voice was quiet, but steady. "Then I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time, she believed it. Their relationship grew stronger, though challenges didn't vanish. Investors questioned her choices. The press followed her family relentlessly. But through it all, Ryan's steady presence grounded her. He never tried to compete with her world of power and wealth. Instead, he reminded her of life as quieter truths, that laughter around a dinner table mattered more than numbers on a screen. Ethan flourished. His grades improved, his laughter grew louder. For him, Ryan became more than a friend, he became family. And slowly, Victoria realized she had found that too. But just when happiness seemed within reach, tragedy struck again. Ethan was injured in a playground accident, rushed to the hospital with a broken leg. Panic swallowed Victoria whole. Ryan stayed by her side through every second, holding her hand in the sterile waiting room, grounding her when fear clawed at her chest. When Ethan finally woke, groggy but smiling, Ryan leaned close and whispered, "Told you I'd always catch you, buddy." Tears filled Victoria's eyes. She knew, without doubt, that Ryan had already saved her family more than once. The board threatened to vote her out if she didn't end things with Ryan. But this time, she didn't hesitate. Standing in the conference room, she looked each member in the eye. "My company was built on strength," she declared, "and true strength comes from the people we love. If you can't accept that, then you don't belong here." It was the boldest move of her career, but it was also the most liberating. When she left the meeting, Ryan was waiting outside. Without words, she walked into his arms. Months passed, and whispers turned into acceptance. Investors adjusted, the press found new stories, and Victoria's empire thrived under her unapologetic leadership. At home, life felt different, softer, fuller. Ethan laughed louder, Ryan cooked dinners, and Victoria rediscovered the sound of her own heart, beating with joy. One evening, under a quiet, starlit sky, Ryan turned to her. "You don't have to say yes," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. "But I had to ask." Her breath caught as she saw the ring, and then, tears falling freely, she whispered the word she thought she'd never say again. "Yes." The wedding was simple, nothing like the grand affairs the tabloids expected. Just close friends, Ethan beaming between them and vows whispered with trembling voices. Victoria had once vowed never to love again. She thought love only brought loss. That hope was too fragile to hold. But Ryan proved her wrong. Because love wasn't about wealth, or power, or perfection. It was about courage. The courage to let someone in, even when it terrified you. As she kissed her new husband, her son cheering beside them, Victoria realized the truth. She hadn't lost her heart. She had simply been waiting for someone strong enough, kind enough to carry it with her. And finally, she had found him.